Breaking news! Breaking news!
Hey everyone, how you guys doing? John Crump here, investigative journalist extraordinaire, and I'm joined by my friend Flying Rich from Flying Rich Firearms and Flying Rich, who is also my reader. We have some really cool breaking news, and it looks like Judge Saint Roger Benitez has struck again. Yeah, 2 hours. I decided in the future if I can upload a thumbnail. So we're going to read through the decision and to see what it says. But he ruled that California's unconstitutional semi-automatic firearms ban, what they call an assault weapons ban, is verboten, not constitutional. So we're going to read through this decision together and see what it says and try to make some sense of it. I have with me today, we're doing the reading. Of course, he is my reader. He is the play-by-play guy, and I'm the color commentary guy. So we're going to go ahead and read it. But this is the case of James Miller versus Bonta. Also, it used to be known as Miller versus Becerra, but since Becerra got the call up to the federal government, Bonta is the AG of California, so of course it is his name on there. Let me just say before we begin, I have no doubt in my mind that the 9th is going to come in and stay this decision.
Yes. Yeah, very likely.
Yeah.
So
I do want to. Yeah, read the introduction because I think the introduction is very good. We're just going to jump right into this.
This guy kills it. He really does. Like the Bowie knife, which was commonly carried by citizens and soldiers in the 1800s, assault weapons are dangerous but useful. But unlike the Bowie knife, the United States Supreme Court has said there is a long tradition of widespread lawful gun ownership by private individuals in this country. Americans have an individual right to keep and bear arms. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees that the individual the right to possess and carry weapons in case of confrontations, whether citizens even fire or needed.
To fire
their weapons, it is not important. This is guaranteed by fully binding states and limits the ability to devise solutions to social problems and protects the possession of weapons that are in common use or arms that are typically possessed by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. These are the decisions this court is bound to apply. It's our duty as judges to interpret the Constitution based on the text and original understanding of the relevant provision, not the public policy considerations or worse, fear of public opprobrium or criticism from the political branches.
Okay, let me just say, I think he's taking a shot at the Ninth Circuit for staying the large capacity magazine. And I say large capacity, we all know their standard capacity, but what they considered large capacity.
Wow. This case is about California laws that, in contrast to these constitutional principles, make it a crime to acquire and possess many common modern semi-automatic firearms. Modern semi-automatic firearms like the AR-15 platform are widely owned. Let's see.
By law-abiding.
All right. Okay, by law-abiding citizens across the nation, other than their looks, the state calls them features or accessories. These
right there, he's taking another shot at him. He's like, "There's looks."
3 guns. These prohibited rifles are virtually the same as other lawfully possessed rifles. They have the same ammunition, overall length, and use the same triggers, have the same barrels, and they can fire the same ammunition from the same magazines at the same rate of fire and at the same velocities as other rifles. What is it then that animates the state's criminalization of possessing certain rifles as assault weapons? It is that similar rifles have been used in some mass shootings, and that by virtue of this law, the legislature has hoped to keep these modern weapons out of the hands of mass shooters. The California legislature at the time in the past, when the lower courts did not recognize an individual right to keep and bear firearms, and it in a state that has no constitutional analog to the Second Amendment, balance the interest above and against law abiding citizens who wanted these firearms for self defense. That was
Yeah.
then. Today, the Supreme Court has very clearly ended modern interest.
Yeah, basically that's the interest balancing test when you weigh the interest of the government versus the interest of the people.
Okay, where are we?
Oh, sorry, I'll scroll down.
Modern interest balancing when it comes to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, the court said, is a very product of an interest balancing by the people, and it surely elevates above all other interests the right of law abiding, responsible citizens to use arms for self defense. It is this balance struck by traditions of the American people that, and we're going to have to scroll, demands our unqualified deference. The American tradition is rich and deep in people protecting a citizen's enduring right to keep and bear common arms like rifles, shotguns, and pistols. However, among the American tradition of firearm ownership, there is nothing like California's prohibition on rifles, shotguns, and handguns based on their looks or attributes. Here, the assault weapon prohibition has no historical pedigree, and in its extreme, even today, neither Congress nor most states impose such prohibitions on modern semi automatic firearms. In contrast, laws that punish criminal acts committed with any gun, like the crime of an assault with a deadly weapon, remain perfectly constitutional. These criminal laws are not at issue here. The state says criminals already have in favor using guns described as assault weapons rather than being outgunned. Many citizens want these same firearms as defense against criminal attacks. Americans today own 24.4 million modern rifles, i.e., AR 15 platform, AK platforms. According to the state's expert of the AR 15 rifle owners surveyed, 61% said the reason they acquired their gun is for home defense. Consequently, while criminals already have these modern semi automatics, the state prohibits its citizens from buying and possessing the same guns for self defense. At the same time, these firearms are commonly possessed by law abiding gun owners everywhere across the country. Guns for self defense are needed a lot because crime happens a lot. A recent large scale survey estimates that guns are needed defensively approximately 1.67 million times a year. Another
Once,
report originally commissioned and
once we get down with this paragraph, we're going to discuss this a little bit.
long cited by Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, estimated that there are between 500,000 and 3 million defensive gun uses in the United States each year. That is a lot of situations where Jane Doe needs a firearm to defend herself and her family. Trial testimony from hoodlums is not needed to prove that a homeowner brandishing an AR 15 can be a strong deterrent to criminal attackers. But when brandishing does not stop an attack, Jane needs an effective defense. This is where an AR 15 style semi automatic rifle can come to the rescue. And although this court focuses its analysis on rifles, California's ban also includes common weapons as semi automatic shotguns with removable magazines, semi automatic handguns with threaded barrels.
Okay, basically what the judge is saying here is what we've always been saying, that the AR-15 is great for home defense,
Yep.
and that home defense is one of the reasons why people buy AR-15s, and that criminals are going to get them no matter what. And the home defender, the citizens have the right to have the same firearms as the people committing the crime. They're in common use, and they are used a lot in defensive uh, encounters.
Okay. People have heard about the Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde, Texas. They have heard about the Sandy Hook Parkland, the Pulse nightclub, and other tragic mass shootings. What they do not hear about the AR-15 used in Florida by a pregnant wife and a mother to defend her family from two armed, hooded, and masked home intruders. As soon as the armed intruders entered the back door of her home, they pistol whipped her husband, fracturing his eye socket and sinus cavity. They grabbed an 11-year-old daughter. The pregnant wife and mother was able to retrieve the AR-15 from a bedroom, fire it, killing one of the attackers while the other fled. This does not require much imagination to think what would happen next if the woman had lived in California, could not possess such a firearm. Heck
I
yeah.
like what he's doing here. I like what he's doing is he's saying, hey, you might cite these, but I'm going to cite these where they actually save people.
Yes, amen, brother. People do not remember the disabled 61-year-old man living alone on a
No, we can
20-acre
skip all
park.
this. This is all he just right here. He just
Case after case of
Case after
self-defense. Yeah, nice.
now he goes down to California. So,
California's assault weapon ban takes away from its residents the choice of using an AR-15 type rifle for self-defense. Is it because modern rifles are used so frequently for crime? No. The United States Department of Justice reports that in the year 2021, in the entire country, 447 were killed with rifles of all types. This includes shotguns. From this, one can say, scroll up, that based on the national population of 320 million people in the United States, rifles of any kind, including AR-15s, were used for homicides only 0.00, holy cow, more zeros, 14% of the time. Put differently, if 447 rifles were used to commit 447 homicides, and every rifle involved in a homicide was an AR-15, it would mean that approximately 24.4 million AR-15s.
a lot of damn for you for purposes, almost to 100%.
So basically, it's an infinitesimal number of the legal AR-15s out there are used for crimes. In California, while modern semi-automatics are not rare, they are rarely the problem. The problem in 2022, only 3 assault weapons were used in violent crimes in California. According to the Attorney General report, firearms used in the commission of crimes. For the preceding year, the report announced that only 2 assault weapons were used in violent crimes, while 2020 report identified 0 assault weapons used. Other government homicide statistics do not track assault rifles, but they show that killing by knife attack is far more common than homicide, I'm assuming with rifles. By any kind of rifle in California, with a population of close to 39 million people, murder by knife occurs 7 times more often than murder by rifle. Of course, this is a type of means and secure scrutiny. Sorry,
Means and
that
scrutiny, the two-step test, intermediate scrutiny, what I just talked about before.
Bruin has made irrelevant for judging constitutionality of firearm ban because people of the United States have already made the decision long ago to protect a citizen's choice to possess and use any common firearm for self-defense. This court understands the unquestionable tragedy that caused lawless individuals using modern semi-automatic guns or any kind of gun to injure or kill innocent men, women, or children. Their lives are important, but are their lives any more important than Jane Doe or the lives of her family? We hear constantly about mass shootings for days and weeks on anniversaries, but how often do we celebrate the life saving of Jane Doe because she was able to use a semi automatic weapon to defend herself and her family from attackers? Are the lives of Jane Doe, John, and Junior Doe worth any less?
Than others. Yeah.
Wow, this
Yeah.
guy's killing it. The state of California posits that the assault weapon ban, the law challenged here, promotes an important public interest of disarming some mass shooters, even though it makes criminals of law abiding residents who insist on acquiring these firearms for self defense. Nevertheless, more than that is required to uphold a ban. The decision that follows will sound repetitive to astute readers of this court's decision in Duncan v. Bonta. Amen, brother.
Yeah. Well, we
Many
did the
of
live
the
stream on
same,
that decision a couple of weeks ago.
yeah, many of the same arguments or historic laws are relied on by the state in other cases.
Now
Bruin makes it
okay,
clear.
we're gonna skip a
Yeah.
lot of this. He goes into Bruin, touches on Heller, and stuff like that. But I do want to get down to here. I start with out of this court because
As this
he's gonna
court
attack
has
the unusually dangerous part.
As this court has previously agreed, all firearms are dangerous. The Second Amendment is unconcerned with Nerf guns and baseball bats.
Foam bats.
Foam ball bat. I'm sorry. The Supreme Court carefully uses the phrase dangerous and unusual arms, while the state, throughout its briefing, refers to dangerous or unusual arms. That the state would advocate such a position is disheartening. Justice Alito took pains to point out that this is a conjunctive test. As per curiam, opinion recognizes this is a conjunctive test. A weapon may not be banned unless it is both dangerous and unusual.
Yeah, what California always tries to do, they try to separate dangerous and unusual. So it's like, oh, like we can ban it if it's dangerous or unusual.
Not and. Okay. If Heller tells us anything, it is that the firearms cannot be categorically prohibited just because they are dangerous. In Heller, the Supreme Court said the firearms that are protected are firearms that are not dangerous and unusual and typically possessed by law abiding citizens for lawful purposes like self defense. This court assumes that the Supreme Court does not use language frivolously, that it says what it means and it means what it says. The dangerous and unusual test is a test that this court will apply. If there is a different test, the circuit court or the Supreme Court will tell us. But for now, this court applies plain meaning of the language used in Heller as the.
So he's not even concentrating on Bruin. He's like, just we don't have to go to Bruin. We can just
As
go
the
directly to
Supreme
Heller.
Court says, despite their potential for harm, guns generally can be owned in perfect innocence. In any event, the arms of the state bans as assault weapons are no more dangerous than other arms that the state does not ban. The banned arms are just modern versions of rifles, shotguns, and pistols. For example, a Springfield 1911 pistol with a threaded barrel is an assault weapon, according to California law. The same 1911 pistol without a threaded barrel is fine. An AR-15 with normal parts is banned, but the same AR-15 with an awkward shark fin grip and unmovable stock and barrel compensator in place of a flash hider shooting the same ammunition is fine.
Basically, Judge Benitez knows what the hell he's talking about, and you can tell he's a fan of the AR-15.
Yeah, I mean, is this guy a gunsmith? Calling back on old recycled justification, the state says that its ban should stand because a person can have many other rifles, shotguns, pistols as one wants. The problem is that the alternatives remain argument has no limiting principle and would justify incremental firearm bans until there is only one single shot derringer remaining for lawful self defense. Heller demolished this argument, the same argument that a handgun might be justified because government approved alternatives are available was rejected in Heller and rejected here. Heller said
Basically,
quite
we're gonna skip down. So he goes into Heller, then he also goes into McDonald and Bruin here, and basically he says that the right to keep and bear arms is the uniquely right to keep and bear arms is multifaceted. And he talks about how the unalienable right to bear arms is not actually given to us by the Constitution, that it seeks to like it's before the Constitution is inalienable. So basically he's going to say that that the right to bear arms is not from the Constitution. It is a human right, and yeah, go pound sand if you don't agree.
wow.
Then he goes. I want to read this really quick. In Miller.
In Miller, the Supreme Court applied a reasonable relationship to militia use test to short-barreled shotgun, asking whether the shotgun would have been a reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia. Finding none, it decided the Second Amendment did not guarantee the right to keep that particular firearm. Miller's realm of Second Amendment protection encircled a firearm if it was reasonably related to militia use. The reasonably related construct received a nod again in Lewis versus U.S., where the Supreme Court approved Miller again, saying saying the Second Amendment guarantees no right to keep and bear a firearm that does not have some reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia. There was no undermining of Miller in Heller or Bruin. Rather, Heller therefore read Miller to say that the Second Amendment does not protect those weapons not typically possessed by law abiding citizens for lawful purposes, such as short barreled shotguns. That accords with the historical understanding of the scope of the right, and Bruin quoted and explained and reaffirmed and then applied Miller. Heller acknowledged the already expansive zone of protection for weapons that could be used by the militia and focused instead on the core of firearms for self defense. In other words, Heller made the logical connection between
Weapons
between
commonly
weapons and
possessed by.
commonly possessed by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes that would also be used for military purposes, i.e., militia. See Miller. The
Yeah,
Supreme Court
basically,
has
what I think he's doing here, the reason why I wanted you to read that is because I think how they always say, military style weapons.
right.
I think he's taking a shot at that, saying, yeah, that's actually what the Second Amendment is about. It's about the citizens to have military style weapons. Then down here he goes into the Bruin and the Assault Weapons Control Act, which
Plaintiffs
is
challenge Plaintiffs challenge a net of interlocking statutes known as the Assault Weapons Control Act, which impose strict criminal restrictions on common firearms that fall under California's complex definition of an assault weapon. The firearms deemed assault weapons are fairly ordinary, popular, modern, semi-automatic
okay.
firearms.
Then he's going to go into how they define it. Center fired rifle with with a detachable magazine and like one feature such as like a folding stock, a barrel shroud, any of those kind of crazy thing. And then he talks about how if you have one, it is a felony. Then he goes down and talks about how he already ruled on this once, and then the ninth ruled another way, overturned his decision, and then it went up to the Supreme Court, and it was remanded down to the ninth, which remanded it down to him
Wow.
to rule on it from the understanding of the ninth. Then he hits where there's no historical pedigree, which means that you can't cite anything at the founding 1791, not 1868, like certain courts in New Mexico likes to say.
Right.
So he goes down and says, there's no historical analog to this, so you cannot do it. He says that he gave the court, the state, all sorts of time to find a historical analog, and they couldn't find it. And then he says, but that doesn't even matter because we've already done the analyzing of the text tradition, text history and tradition of the Second Amendment, and there's nothing there.
Wow.
So
Right.
he cites all the cases, Bruin, McDonald, everything else. This is one I wanted. 1791 to 1868.
Bruin teaches that most significant historical evidence comes from 1791 and the secondarily 1868 for the Second Amendment
Okay,
and
stop
other.
right there. Stop right there. Certain, like the 11th, they consider 1868 they consider 1868 the founding era, not 1791. 1868 is when the 14th Amendment was ratified, and basically all that said is the Bill of Rights applies to the states. So the 11th and the court out in New Mexico, the district judge out in New Mexico, says that that it's 1868 we should be using and not 1791.
So federally 1791, and according to them, the gut grabbers 1868.
Yeah, 1868, because if you know what happened in 1868, that was Reconstruction period, Jim Crow laws. There was a lot of former enslaved people in the South, and the people did not want them to get guns. So they passed all these Jim Crow laws that basically stopped them from getting guns. And that is what they are talking about. CG, we're going to get to that in a second. So, yeah. So basically, he explains why the courts should prefer 1791 over 1868. Then he lists states' relevant laws here. So read a little bit of this. Then we're going to sit down a little bit
aid in
more.
the task of looking for a national historical tradition of firearm regulation, the state was directed to create a list of relevant laws regulating arms dating from the time of the Second Amendment, 1791, that's when it was ratified, to 20 years after the 14th Amendment, so 1868 plus 20, was not acknowledged that 20 years after the 14th Amendment is a relevant period. 20 years after the 14th Amendment is an admittedly arbitrary limit and probably includes laws too late to shed much light.
So he's saying, I told him to give me this. I didn't say that I was going to use all that. I just gave a time period for them to use.
The state went far beyond. The state produced a list of 316 laws covering 550 years from 1383 to 1990.
The reason why you do that is because they couldn't find out a lot.
Wow. Many of the entries are not relevant because they came much earlier or later than most significant time period, 1791 to 1868. The first 14 laws predate the Second Amendment.
No.
At the other end, the last 225 laws postdate the adoption of the 14th Amendment. Also, 2/3 of the state's list 199 laws are restrictions on use, not possession. Here, The assault weapon laws prohibit possession, manufacturing, giving, lending, offering for sale, etc., instead of regulating the use or manner of carrying guns. The laws challenged here impose no additional taxes or prohibitions on firearms, yet the state's historical list also includes 22 tax
Tax law.
laws.
So basically, what he's trying to say here is the state gave me a bunch of shit to try to make their case look stronger than what it was.
Whoa! All right, now he's really ripping on it. He says the state's list, which includes scroll back away, which states list which applied only particular disfavored people groups such as slaves, blacks, or mulattoes, meaning all gun control's racist.
Yes,
Those
that's what he's
laws
saying.
are not relevant to the assault weapon ban challenged in this case. Even if they were, this court would give such discriminatory laws little or no weight. Yes.
So he basically said, "Get the racist laws out of here. What are you doing, man?"
Woo. Amen, brother. This guy's
Then
killing it.
he goes into tradition and says, "Well, I'm going to do my own analysis here."
The tradition and history of the United States of
Okay,
America
you
is
don't have to read this part. He basically said that, between 1791 and 1868, there weren't really restrictions on carrying firearms. You could carry firearms.
I'm betting like every good lawyer or judge, he didn't ask a question he didn't already know the answer to. So when he gave them that date range, he knew.
Yeah, go down here to even today.
Even today, the CMP sells surplus actual weapons of war to citizens, including 45 caliber, 1911 pistol, 30 caliber M1 Garand, M1 carbine. M1 carbine came with a standard 15 and 20 round detachable magazine. According to the Government Accountability Office, since 1996, the Army has transferred 700,000 surplus military rifles to the CMP for sale to citizens. The M1 carbine, which the federal government sold to citizens over the years, could easily be deemed an assault weapon under California definitions. It is certainly the case for the World War II M1A1 carbine paratrooper version, with its folding stock and 15-round detachable magazine and flash suppressor. The M1 carbine is a centerfire semi-automatic large caliber that has been used by the military of many nations and has the Ruger Mini 14. The AR-15, in other hand, is not used by the military as a standard
issue piece. Basically, they're saying you keep on calling this a weapon of war, but you guys don't have any problems about any real weapons of war.
Yeah.
Because the AR-15 is not a weapon of war because it's never been used by any military. But these other guns that you have no problem with were. So what the hell are you talking about?
He's killing it. He did the work of all the lawyers here.
Yeah. Then he states that laws that are closer to the Second Amendment have more weight than the farther you get away from it. Okay, go right down here to line 22.
The state's experts opine that gun laws were plentiful and widespread and firearm regulation was the norm. But if the test were to look at gun laws with that level of generality, no gun law would ever fail scrutiny, and Heller and McDonnell and Bruin could not have been decided as they were. Furthermore, as it will be shown in its exaggeration, the state also says that regulations on dangerous or unusual weapons existed throughout American history. By weapons, the state means bladed or melee weapons, not firearms.
Relevantly, you showed a bunch of laws dealing with knives and not really firearms. So get the hell out of here with that.
Wow.
And then he goes and he cites some of the laws.
Wow.
Go to line 4.
Line 4. During the most important period of history, there were relatively few gun restrictions. This conclusion can be drawn from inspecting the state's comprehensive historic
Struck down.
law list and is confirmed by at least one historian between 1607 to 1850 in the colonial and state governments of what would become the first 14 states neglected to exercise any police power over the ownership of guns by members of the body politic. These limits on colonial and early state regulation of arms ownership outlined a significant zone of immunity around the private arms of an individual citizen. More importantly, it is a conclusion confirmed by the Supreme Court. Bruin says, apart from a few late 19th century outlier jurisdictions, American governments have simply
Not broadly prohibited
have
public
not
carry.
broadly prohibited the public carry of commonly used firearms for personal defense.
Then
There
he
were-
goes down and he talks about here that firearms were restricted to carry after 1868. He doesn't say 1868, but he's talking about that. But within southern states. So start with 17. In short, actually, I read that. In short, California Weekly argues that because some now go down to 1.
Some states have regulated in some ways the use of some weapons that translates into the state being able to regulate any weapon in any way. This is a non sequitur and particularly in this case a bridge too far.
Yeah. And then he goes into more of the law where he says, the prohibition of possessing guns. And then he goes that there was that state did not identify anywhere any laws between 1791 and 1868 that shows that you're not allowed to possess guns. And then he says that after 1868, for 50 years, there was no gun laws in the northern states until you get to the Sullivan laws in New York. But he basically is making a point that the gun laws in the South here were racist. Yeah, read line 7.
Line 7. The same was largely true south of the Mason-Dixon line, disregarding laws concerning slaves and Indians, neither of which were considered citizens. Like the northern states, from time of adoption of the Second Amendment to the time of adoption of the 14th Amendment, there were no state laws in Delaware, North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, West Virginia, and Texas according to the state's law list. A citizen could reside in any of the northern states and half of the southern states for 50 years free from state government firearm restrictions. This understanding is not based on expert opinion, but a methodical reading of and assessment of the law set in our government survey. The party's own experts express the same disagreement but are unpersuasive.
Yeah, basically he's saying that, hey, this isn't opinion, this is
fact. It's fact.
Yeah, and then he points out that 1871 was like the first laws about concealed carry, and stuff like that. And then he points out Illinois, where a lot of people cite the Illinois law. Oh, Illinois in 1845 had a law preventing the carry of firearms, but they always lead out the part that says, with the intent to assault another person. That's always left out for some reason. I don't know why. Then he goes into laws in southern states. The 50 years after that, there's no laws in southern states until, whatever. And then he goes into territories, and he states that, hey, Bruin's already considered such laws and decided that they are not particularly helpful for several reasons. Because it was localized restrictions in a territory and not a state. From 2, where it says these territorial legislative and provisions. He was gonna.
Yeah. These territorial legislative improvisations, which conflict with the nation's earlier approach to firearm regulation, are most unlikely to reflect the origins and continuing significance of the Second Amendment, and we do not consider them instructive. Second, because the territorial laws were rarely subject to judicial scrutiny, we do not know the basis of their perceived legality. We fail to see how they inform the origins and continuing significance of the amendment. Finally, these territorial restrictions deserve little weight because they were consistent with the territory nature of territorial government, short lived. Thus, they appear.
Basically, they're saying that they're bullshit. Well, and then he also says none of them actually prevented people from having certain types of guns. Then he goes into some territory stuff. And then he goes and try and read from 14.
With nothing else to go on, the state tries to identify a tradition of firearm regulation based on 4 laws that the state claims banned possession of dangerous weapons because a law criminalizing a mere possession of a firearm in one's home kept for self-defense, like California's Assault Weapon Control Act, is so extreme. It would be very important if the state could at least point to a historical tradition of banning the simple possession of any kind of firearm. Unfortunately, the state is unable to find such a tradition. The 4 laws it offers up either did not ban firearms or they did not ban possession. Moreover, the 4 long shot laws came too late in time to establish a new tradition and cannot be used to confirm a non-existent earlier tradition. Wow.
Yeah, but like he basically, one of the laws was like an 1866 law in New York that banned like daggers, and there's one in 1881 that banned what did they ban? Oh, right here, billy clubs and stuff like that. So that's some of the stuff that they were citing. It's saying that, that it doesn't really work there, and there's no analogs for an assault weapons ban that they can find, and it goes into what an analog is. I'm trying to get through this a little bit faster.
Well, we're halfway through now.
Yeah. And then it talks about trap gun laws. We go to 16.
16. First, that state does not admit or seem to recognize that trap guns are not guns at all. They are a method by which a gun or any gun can be set up and fired indiscriminately through the use of springs, strings, and other atypical triggering mechanisms without an operator.
Yeah, that's
Second,
like if you
booby trap.
Booby trap, like you put like a tripwire and attach it to a shotgun, so when someone hits a tripwire, it shoots them. So one of the things that California was trying to say is like, hey, these are banned, and he's saying they're not banned because they're firearms. They're banned because they're booby traps.
Mm-hmm.
And then gunpowder storage laws. He was like, "That. What are you talking about?" And he's like, "That, has to do with fires, and
Right.
not really carrying of firearms. So that's a long shot." Which is kind of funny. I
Well,
knew he was going to do that.
and
That was
you didn't
almost
have running water. You didn't have modern fire suppression techniques, fire extinguishers, etc., that we do now.
Yeah. Then he talks about how the state's trying to argue the concealed carry of dirks, daggers, and Bowie knives are an analog, but he's like, no, they're not. Go down to 18 where it says 13 where it says many.
Many have forgotten, or worse yet intentionally ignored, that the most horrible single mass killing in America's history was facilitated by terrorists with Swiss Army knives and other.
Short blade instruments. He's talking about 9/11.
Okay.
So he's like, hey, look, they did more damage than any mass shooting ever, and they used bladed
Box cutters.
weapons, like
Yeah.
box cutters and stuff.
Wow.
Then it tackles concealed carry. Basically, says concealed carry laws are unconstitutional. Right, and go to number 5.
5. The state includes its collection an 1801 surety statute from Tennessee. Early surety statutes are evidence that carrying a gun was normal, but historic surety statutes could not justify the District of Columbia's modern handgun ban. State courts recognized that even the common law did not punish the carrying of deadly weapons per se. All told, notes Bruin, under surety laws, everyone started out with robust carry rights. Historic surety statutes are not analogs to states' ban on acquiring and possessing assault weapons.
So he said you can't use that as an analog.
Ooh, machine gun laws. What's that say?
All right, go to 13.
The state also cites 20th century machine gun restrictions. These laws do not evidence a long enough historical tradition of prohibiting particular firearms. These few and ephemeral regulations mostly came and went with little fanfare during the 20th century, as discussed in the court's original decision. The argument that machine gun laws of the 20th century are analogs to the assault weapon ban fares better today.
He's
no better
basically saying that, that what are you doing? That they use our 1934 is not the founding era. And then he goes and he calls out the racist gun laws, which is freaking awesome.
Oh my gosh, when do we party?
All right, let's go. Let's read number 2 because this is awesome.
Among the state's first list of firearm laws are a number of statutes based on a person's race, color, or slave status. The state agrees that these old reprehensible laws are morally repugnant and would obviously be unconstitutional today. Though the state suggests that these despicable legislative efforts might somehow be relevant to determining the traditions that define the scope of the Second Amendment, that makes little sense. One reason is these laws treated our citizens as non-citizens that were not entitled to fully enjoy constitutional rights.
We're going to get really cool. Read the next line.
In other words, the legislators who passed these embarrassments were not concerned with Second Amendment rights of citizens.
He calls them embarrassments.
Yes.
Then he goes into what the historians state, which we're going to skip all this because we got to get down because we were like way longer than what I wanted to go. We're already
You know what? I always thought I wanted to meet Clarence Thomas and like talk with him. This guy I want to meet.
All right. Then he talks about their non-historian expert witnesses.
The state offers declarations from a number of other expert witnesses to address subjects other than historical analogs. In general, these subjects that this court has already addressed in earlier opinion and is beyond the Court of Appeals remand order. Nevertheless, some of these opinions mentioned here, Dr. Lewis, reports that there are now an estimated 24.4 million rifles like the AR-15, AK-47 in circulation in the United States. He estimates 7.9 million individuals own modern sporting rifles. He also supports that his search of newspaper archives found no mass shootings of 10 or more deaths until 1949. In looking, he excluded from the search incidents of large-scale intergroup gun violence, such as mob violence and rioting. Certainly, such events have occurred in the nation's history, such as Philadelphia nativist riots in the spring and summer of 1844.
Basically, he's calling him out. He's saying, hey, man, you cooked the books. And now Ryan Boothie, or if you don't know who Ryan Boothie is, he used to work for Kimber and used to be like a gun guy. And then he went to Giffords. He went over to the dark side. And now he's working for Giffords as their firearms expert. He's a jackass. I've gotten into him on Twitter a lot.
So Ryan Boosie is a Gifford senior advisor and former firearm industry executive
Yeah,
from
he
a
used to work for Kimber.
manufacturer and seller that specializes in pistols and revolvers, but not AR-15 platform rifles. The few rifles sold by his former firm are traditional style bolt action models. Boosie opines that a firearm does not need any of the devices, accessories, or configurations listed in the assault weapon ban to operate as a gun intended or to use a gun effectively for self defense. It is not at all clear what expert Boosie has to support his
Expertise.
opinion.
Yeah.
He does not describe any professional experience using an AR-15 platform rifle for sport or self-defense. In any event, this type of opinion is not relevant to the question of whether the state may ban a firearm that is commonly used by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes and does not fit the prerequisites of Federal Rule of Evidence 702.
Yeah. Basically saying Ryan Boosie does not know about AR-15 or Bussy. I like calling him Boosie just because it sounds like pussy, but Bussy doesn't know about AR-15s. And
Another expert witness for the state economist Lucy Allen has supplemented her earlier testimony. Today, she opines on the frequency of rifles reported in defensive gun uses. The state asserts that Allen's statistics prove assault weapons are not being commonly fired for self defense. To support the notion, Allen looks at a very small database of defensive gun uses collected from news broadcasts or publications where 54% of the time gun type is unknown. From this, she implies that using a rifle to defend oneself is incredibly rare. Her charts misleadingly suggest that rifles are used in just 2 to 4% of defensive gun uses and actually occur only 51 times across the 3.5 years. Other evidence suggests that guns are needed and used defensively thousands of times each year, and that rifles are used far more frequently than Allen's statistics suggest. How does Allen arrive at her opinion? She looks at a database maintained by the Heritage Foundation. The database explicitly states that it is not intended to be comprehensive. It attempts to highlight some successful defensive gun uses that are reported by news organs. Allen counts 2714 total defensive gun uses in the database between 2019 and 2022. Her results cannot be tested because she does not identify the specific incidents or how she scored the gun type variables attributed to each incident. Consequently, there is no way to check her analysis or her math. Her study cannot be reproduced. Unfortunately, this means her opinion lacks classic indicator of reliability. Reliability and validity are two aspects of accuracy and measurement. These statistics, reliability to reproducibility of results.
yeah, basically it's saying that she doesn't even like list anything, and over half the cases, the firearm type is unknown. So maybe they're all rifles, maybe none of them are rifles, but we do not know.
Wow. Wow.
So he basically says her stuff is trash because she didn't cite anything.
This guy's killing it.
Then John Donahue, who's another really, really anti-gun guy.
John J. Donahue is a professor of law. His supplemental declaration is not particularly helpful. For example, Professor Donahue describes a 2018 medical study published in JMA Network Open about 512 gunshot victims in Boston. He opines the study applies directly to bans of assault weapons and high capacity magazines, yet the study noted only one of the 511 victims studied was shot with a rifle caliber round 7.62 by 39. Why the study applies directly to bans on assault weapons, as Professor Donahue opines, is not at all obvious. Handgun wounds were the main point of the study.
Yeah, basically saying like, what the hell are you talking about? And I want to bring up the next paragraph just because it states Stephen.
All right, Professor Donahue also opines that the dangers of weapons like AR-15s will outpace any legitimate crime-reducing benefit the firearms provide, citing a 2017 Sutherland Springs Baptist Church.
Yeah, Stephen
Keep
Williford is
it.
a friend of all of ours, and we actually hung out with him less than a month ago.
Yeah, a couple weeks back.
A couple weeks
He
back, we were
picked
hanging out with him.
an ironic example. A neighbor, Stephen Williford, stopped a mass shooter in that tragedy with 4 shots from his own AR-15, barefoot, running down a street, and hit every round on target.
Yeah.
Professor Donahue previously commented on lawful to own Ruger Mini 14 rifle, which is similar to banned rifles. He offered that the Mini 14's current legality is because the firearm restrictions are to be increased incrementally. He concludes with the abject conjecture, imagining the January 6, 2021 Capitol rally would have turned out like the 1970 Kent State shooting, but for the District of Columbia's prohibition on assault weapons. Professor Donahue's opinions are entitled "No Wait,
Yeah.
You Get a Zero."
Yeah, Kent State was when the National Guard actually shot a bunch of people, which and go to 14.
Wow.
We're almost done here, guys.
A new twist on an old argument is that standard AR-15 type rifles are not commonly owned by law-abiding persons for lawful purposes. An expert witness for the state suggests that although such rifles number more than 24.4 million among Americans, a smaller number of people, 7.9 million,
Like 8
might
million people.
own
Come on.
most of them. 7,900,000 persons is still a large number of citizens choosing to own AR-15 platforms. When the Supreme Court vacated Katian's conviction for mere possession of a stun gun, 200,000 owners of stun guns was all it took.
Yeah, the Supreme Court ruled that stun guns are in common use because there's 200,000 of them, and this guy's like,
Dang.
there's, then go to 8.
The state offers a word game for another new argument. The state suggests that standard AR-15 type rifles might be commonly owned but are not used for self-defense. The state says that there is no evidence that firearms equipped with the prohibited accessories or semi-automatic centerfire rifles of less than 30 inches in length are commonly used for self-defense. Once again, the burden is on the government to prove the remarkable claim.
This is awesome. Go ahead, read the next line.
It does not take a Nobel laureate to figure out that if Americans own 400 million guns and 400 million gun crimes are not being committed, that Americans are using their guns for something other than crime. If Americans own 24.4 million AR-15s and 24.4 million gun crimes are not being committed with AR-15s, Americans must be using them for lawful purposes. Some people actively use AR-15s for hunting or sport or target practice. Probably the vast majority of Americans that own guns keep them for self-defense the same way a driver puts on a seatbelt in case of collision. Though collisions rarely happen, the seatbelt is used for protection and to be ready for the unexpected collision. A reserve canopy is being used on a parachute jump, although it is not deployed in case, oh wait, I'm reading it back. Although it is not deployed in the main parachute fails, a cell phone in one's pocket is being used when waiting for a telephone call or when one might need to make a call. An AR-15 under one's bed at night is being used for self-defense even when the night is quiet. A person may happily live a lifetime without having to fire their gun in self-defense, but that is not to say that the person does not use their gun for self-defense when he or she keeps it under their bed with a hope and a prayer that is never fired. Wow, what an
And
argument.
then it uses some more examples, like an 81-year-old guy and stuff like that. And then they go on to the accessories, which is on page 73. Go ahead, read 5.
The state downplays the assault weapon ban by saying it does not prohibit anyone from keeping and bearing arms. It merely regulates the use of certain accessories that can be attached to the semi-automatic rifle. The state says that the accessories are not arms. The state says that the prohibited accessories are not integral to the functioning of the firearm, and
Yeah.
semi-automatic centerfire rifles
The-
are at least
One of the arguments that they make is they're not actually banning the firearm, they're banning the accessories.
But the assault weapon ban laws do not ban one's possession of individual accessories or parts. They ban one possession of the whole rifle, entire shotguns, and working pistols. The state also says that one's possession of the state also that all right, says that
we can skip that. Then he goes on to the weapons of war thing, saying they argue weapons of war, but weapons of war, hey, they're a-okay, so that doesn't need to be argued.
wow.
We go down to 2.
2. The state makes a passing argument that weapons with the configurations prohibited by the assault weapons ban are military weapons that are particularly indistinguishable from assault rifles, like the M16, and thus may be banned, consistent with Heller. Staples explains the relevant difference. The M16 is a fully automatic machine gun. Undercutting its own argument, the state says that machine guns may be banned, while at the same time the state acknowledges its own briefing that machine guns are not banned under federal law. In fact, there are 700,000 machine guns lawfully registered in the nation. So many lawfully owned machine guns suggest that the state's approach to banning semi-automatic AR-15s is infringing. This court will not engage in specious argument about whether AR-15s can fire almost as fast as a machine gun, nor will it venture a decision of effective versus theoretical firing capability.
Yeah, okay. You skip this. I want to go down to 15.
Like Baghdad Bob. Like Baghdad Bob during the first Gulf War in 1991. The state clings to a wish. The state wants to believe that firearms prohibited by assault weapon by the assault weapon ban are not commonly owned or are not commonly owned for self-defense. The argument remains unconvincing. Normal AR-15s are still massively popular. Let's see.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that up.
Baghdad Bob, what a reference!
That he caught. Then he goes over the the regulated configurations are not. The state argues that flash hiders and everything are not suited for self defense, and he basically says, yeah, they are. Then the state police powers go down to 12.
The state claims that the Second Amendment is not to be read literally. Instead, it claims the history of the Second Amendment demonstrates that governments enjoyed robust police powers to regulate weapons, including who may possess them, where they may be possessed, and what weapons may be possessed and used. But as was shown above, that is inaccurate. Yes.
Yeah, and then he says that that it never is. Go down to 5.
It is still true that the very purpose of a Bill of Rights was to withdraw certain subjects from the vicissitudes of political controversy, to place them beyond the reach of majorities and officials, and to establish them as legal principles to be applied by the courts. one's right to life, liberty, and prosperity, to free speech, to free press, freedom of worship, freedom of assembly, and other fundamental rights may not be submitted to a vote. They depend on the outcome of no elections.
Basically,
Holy
you can't vote to ban them.
yes.
Then this conclusion is that the state is wrong, and he enters a judgment for the plaintiff. Now, he stays his own decision by 10 days because he knows what's going to happen. Banta is going to appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And then what they're probably going to do is they're going to stay the decision until they hear it. This is what they always do.
In Harry Potter terms, this is a howler.
Yeah, but this he tears him up. I mean, he calls him freaking Baghdad Bob.
Baghdad Bob. Oh my gosh, racist. Oh, like just wow. In the most polite ways. Wow.
I don't think he was too polite.
Better than I would do.
Yeah. So this is a good decision. So we'll have to see what happens. But I would expect that the Ninth Circuit's going to issue a stay because they always do.
Is there like does he have a social media account I can write fan letters to?
Yeah, I highlighted a couple, like 4 different things I'm going to go through really quick. Will this help out Illinois? You better believe that they're going to file a brief of supplemental authority in that case. Supplemental authority is saying, hey, look at what this other court decided. Doesn't mean that the courts have to do exactly what Benitez says, but at the same time, the courts have to take what the judge says into consideration.
Wow.
This is the reason why Benitez took so long to write this ruling, while the ADHD crowd was complaining it was taking too long. Yes, you are correct. Most people thought that he was going to write a decision, something like this.
This is 79 pages of thoroughly thoughtful and researched information. I mean, just boy, if I was a lawyer in pro Second Amendment, I'd want all of my cases to go through him because he's writing the brief for me. I mean, this guy's got it.
Yeah. Well, we don't know. We don't know who's going to be on the 3-judge panel, and I got a feeling that it's just going to go en banc, like they did with the magazine ban. They're just going to take it en banc, which is very unusual, and I think it was the only time it's ever been done. I think they're going to do it again. Any barrel length statement? It just said that just because a rifle has a total length less than 30 inches doesn't mean it's inherently dangerous and unusual. Mining a Billy, it is a Lucille. Shout out to The Walking Dead there. One Car Fast says, gun control is the last racist laws in the books, and I do agree with that.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. All right. So that is it. That was definitely a beatdown, as Toby says. And I would 100% agree. It is definitely a beatdown. Yeah. And then, like I said, I believe the Ninth Circuit will stay it. If the process is followed, goes to a 3-judge panel, correct. But what happened in Duncan is it was going to go to a 3-judge panel to decide whether to issue a stay or not, but then it went en banc instead of going to a 3-judge panel, which is very, very unusual. That's not the way it's supposed to be done, and that's not the way it ever is done. But for some reason, they did it this time, and I believe that they're probably going to do it again that way. So we'll have to see what happens. Yeah, they are using interest balancing, even though that they say They're not. They are. All
Mhm.
right, guys. We'll be back in like an hour and a half over on
No.
John Crump News.
Oh yeah, hour and a half. That's right.
We have not John Crump News, John Crump Live. We have a really cool guy on there. His name is Don Mann. He former SEAL Team 6 climbed Everest, did some 1,000-mile races, been on TV shows. He's a New York Times best-selling author.
Motivational speaker and full-time badass.
Freaking does whatever, man. He was just really good. So if you guys want to tune into that, that's John Crump Live, and that's at 5 p.m. I'm going to link the document if you want to read through it yourself. There it is.
I need to get that framed. Can I send it to him? Get it signed? Can I get like my own signed copy?
No, probably not. And with that, we are out of here. Thank you guys so much. Check out Flying Rich at Flying Rich and Flying Rich Firearms. And I'll see you guys at 5 if you want to